Good evening. I'm Richard Sommer, the Dean of the Daniels Faculty. I want to welcome you all on this quite balmy fall evening. Our semester has begun very smoothly and in a very robust way. We have a little bit of trouble today. Last night, someone set a fire under that booth right there. In the alley below that comes below it, and so we've had to rewire the whole rooms to make this lecture happen today, and I want to thank everyone on the staff and our helpers that made that happen. Thus the mic boom and all the equipment, but I think we have it figured out. So I want to introduce our speaker tonight, Gregg Pasquarelli, and on top of it, Gregg's flight was delayed, so he is just arriving this second, but he's ready to go. But before I introduce the speaker tonight, I'd like to acknowledge and thank our sponsor, Bulthaup, for their support of this lecture and the entire Bulthaup series this year. For the past 6 years, Bulthaup's sponsorship has made it possible for us to host some of the most amazing array of speakers, and more importantly, create an exchange of ideas on new thinking in architecture that have become a highly anticipated set of presentations and discussions by the design community here. As you may know, the Bulthaup brand is known worldwide for its focus on the architecture of living spaces. In Toronto, you can see their unique design philosophy in evolving displays at their King Street showroom. Stefan Sibidlo, where are you, Stefan? Is representing Bulthaup tonight, and I just want to take a moment and thank him and the company for their sponsorship, continuing sponsorship. Okay, on to our first speaker in the series, Gregg Pasquarelli. Gregg is a founding principal of Shop Architects based in New York City. Shop, in case some of you don't know, is among the most forward-thinking architecture firms practicing internationally today. Gregg's individual accomplishments as an architect, teacher, and thinker are many. He has held prestigious visiting chairs at a number of the best schools of architecture in the United States, including at different times over the past decade, the Davenport Professorship, the Saarinen Professorship, and the Lewis Kahn Professorship at Yale School of Architecture. He's also served as the Schur Professor of Architecture at the University of Virginia in 2003, and was an adjunct professor of architecture at Columbia University's Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation from 1996 to 2003. Gregg has lectured widely on his designs, Gregg has lectured widely, and his designs and ideas about architecture and contemporary practice have been published widely in the press. He serves on the board of directors of the Architectural League of New York and is a Young Leaders Fellow of the National Committee on United States-China Relations. With his partners at Shop, Gregg has carved out a unique position and achieved acclaim for projects, and this is just a few of them, projects such as the Barclays Center in Brooklyn, the Botswana Innovation Hub in Gaborone, Botswana, and a 2-mile esplanade and park along New York's East River waterfront. The firm's most recent awards, and this is just a few among many, include the 2009 National Design Award in Architecture, an architectural design from the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum, and the 2008 SBIC Beyond Green High Performance Building Award. Now, I don't want to actually reveal too much about what makes Shop and Gregg Pasquarelli's approach so unique and important in the field today, because I know Gregg is the best advocate there could be for Shop's approach. But I will make a few comments for context. In the history of modern architecture, as it has evolved from the early industrial period, there have been certain critical ambitions that have consistently preoccupied architects and animated the field. Among these is the dream of integrating artistry and construction and the creation of ever greater continuities. Now, when I say continuities, I mean both the spatial and socio-political, in both the spatial and socio-political sense. In the spatial sense, I mean creating a more fluid, open, and connected built environment, for example, sustaining a network of activity between exterior landscape and interior dwelling. In the political or socio-political sense, I mean attending to the modes of building and city production that make such liberating spatial continuities possible by connecting the many strands of architectural practice with the economic, political, and technological processes that make constructing more beautifully integrated spatial environments possible. So I would simply ask you to keep an eye out for the concept of continuity in what you're about to see. I also want you to perhaps see Shop's work as a contemporary manifestation within a long cyclical trajectory of architectural movements that have been concerned with the challenge of bringing artistry to bear on the problem of organizing construction to a greater environmental synthesis. From the Werkbund and Hannes Meyer at the Bauhaus, to the utopian schemes of people like Buckminster Fuller and Constant up through the 1970s. These are all, in a way, historical precedents for some of what you're about to see. Yet today, unlike before, the technological means may be at hand to actually build the kinds of forms, spaces, and continuities that have been only vaguely imagined or approximated in built forms in the past. What I think is so important about the approach Shop has been pursuing and that Gregg has been espousing to great effect is that only by the architect taking on a greater role in the means, methods, and bureaucracies of building and development can progress in this area truly be made. So with that, I would like to welcome Gregg Pasquarelli to the stage.
Thank you, Richard, very much. I think I need that text. We could use that somewhere. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here tonight. I did just get here about a minute before I walked into the auditorium, so I think I'm just ready to roll right into it. But Shop is the name of our firm. It originally stood for Sharpless, Holden, Pasquarelli, but more than a decade ago, we took our names off the door because we didn't believe it was about our names. We wanted it to be about something else, another kind of sort of think tank of work. But even though it's 3 names, it's actually 5 founding partners, and that's because the partnership is made up of 2 husbands and wives and the identical twin brother of one of the husbands. And so that sort of confuses everybody. So we made this chart so you can understand it. So all 5 of us went to Columbia, and on the left is the year that we graduated. Chris was in the class of 90. Corey, Bill, Kim, and I were in the class of 94. So if you're inside a green box, you're married and share things like bank accounts. And if you're inside the blue blob, you're identical twins and you share things like genetic code. So the sort of brutal semester at Columbia is the first semester of second year when you're forced to work together in a housing studio. And so the beginning of our office came from when Bill and I were housing partners. And it was also the same year that 1,000 Plateaus came out, which was a horrible book to read right when you're starting to do housing. And so we struggled through it all year. We had this great semester. We threw our project out 12 times. And at the end, we said, you're a great guy, but the one thing we should never do is practice together. And almost 20 years later now, we're still practicing together. So we're now a firm of about 90 architects in New York. And it's changed and grown very rapidly. And I'm going to sort of break the office. I figured the best thing to share with you is sort of how do you go from 5 to 90 in 12 years? Because I think that's a kind of interesting story and the things that we did. And so there's sort of Shop version 1.0, 2.0, and we're right now starting to launch Shop version 3.0. So what brought the 5 of us together was this is our diagram of the last 150 years of architectural history and or of the practice of architecture. And when we were in school, which is now frighteningly a generation ago, there was this real division that was going on. And our professors actually sort of asked us, so what are you going to do? You guys are pretty good. Are you going to enter competitions and do really cool buildings and try and win one and think and teach and do this stuff? Or are you going to learn how to build and actually be able to pull off a large-scale building? And we just didn't understand why you had to make that choice. And the thing that brought us together was, I think the other thing was this kind of cycle of stylistic consumption or the battle of the isms, as we like to call it. And you could probably all name the Pritzker Prize winner that fits in on each one of these. And our feeling was like, why would you think about architecture this way? Why would there be, a couple of like really good French philosophy books written, a kind of, aesthetic attached to it, a show at MoMA, then it's 2 buildings get built and then it's derided and the next style comes in. And we just wanted to think more long-term than that. So I think those were the kind of 2 things that brought the 5 of us together, and we didn't really have a kind of singular aesthetic, but we had a desire for really attacking practice. And we thought that if we could attack practice and rethink the way in which architects actually make things, that we might be able to have something emerge over the coming decades. And so the way we like to talk about it is that we're a both-and firm. We treasure academia, we treasure teaching and thinking. We wish we were better writers. At the same time, we also really love to get dirty, and we love to figure out how to build things and how to produce them, to get involved in the kind of the finance, the technology, the politics behind the making of buildings. And that sort of friction or also complementary skills has been the kind of nexus of the way that we like to work in the office. So as we're starting out, this is sort of the mid-90s, and we're thinking about a kind of aesthetic. Like, how do you start to think about what the right way of thinking about the forms that would be associated with the both-and practice and the kind of performances that we're trying to engage? And for us, it started very clearly in this notion of performance-based design, this kind of idea of a relationship between form and performance. And the 2 places we saw that being the most evidently or most precisely done were in aerospace and the automotive industry. But of course, it exists in nature. It's existed in technology for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And then it's also also sort of existed in the way in which technology and new materials, new ways of putting things together also led to sort of advances in morphology, in ornament, in design, and that you could see that continual idea of these jumps that happen over the decades and the centuries. Now, as the computers were finally getting sort of fast enough and cheap enough that architects could use them, and we kept sort of programming a lot of this stuff in, a lot of complex curvature came out and were the results of these relationships. And whether we like complex curvature or don't really wasn't the sort of important thing. But what we started to see was, well, if we want to get this stuff built, we've got to figure out how to build it at a reasonable budget. Because, in 1997, 8, 9, when we're just starting out and a bunch of 30-year-olds, we know that we're not going to get the Frank Gehry budgets to pull off those buildings. So we said, well, what could we do to sort of jump a generation and think about what's going to happen next? And so a lot of our ideas and a lot of our research went into CNC production, which I know is so standard now, but in 1997 and 8, it was very, very brand new. And we started to really invest a lot of our ideas and our research into this idea of how do we make this connection between the form, the performance, the way of drawing, the methods of production, and the methods of assembly. Now, as we started to do this, we started to see that the kind of standard language of the architect or our profession of using the plan, the section, and the elevation as ways of describing the way in which a building is made were starting to become less and less important. And in fact, it started to become more about force. It was sort of the diagrams of forces and relationships. It was sort of axons. It was the pulling apart of the material and the way it got sort of transferred all the way back to the raw material. So it became sort of a 4D, a 5D, and a 6D process that we started to play with. And so at the end of the day, and the sort of launching idea of Shop version 1.0 was this notion that we didn't really care about the kind of shape at the end of the day. It was how it was made and what it did that mattered to us the most. So whether it's several of the hundreds of shaped bricks in Brunelleschi's dome, or 3 of the 4,000 uniquely shaped pieces of zinc on the Porterhouse, it was about architects starting to move beyond just the aesthetic or the image of the building, but getting into what we called the thickness, this idea of the depth of all the things that come together in order to make a building and to make cities. So how do we start to attack this idea? Because we really saw the problem was not truly in what we would say the architecture that we grew up with. A lot of it was sort of embedded in the AIA, and at least for us, the AIA. And this is the only drawing in the AIA documents. And we believe that we will stand by this, that this is the single worst architectural drawing of all time. This is not a drawing by architects. This is a drawing by lawyers trying to ensure that they have work for the rest of their lives. This is a job that takes all the people that have to think and cooperate together in order to make better buildings and put them into these acrimonious adversarial relationships so that there would be this kind of never-ending battle. And the end result of it is a kind of lowest common denominator architecture that gets made far too often, and a kind of system of can'ts and don'ts rather than a system of sort of innovation. So we started to really think, like, how do you expand practice? What are all the things that we could do? And Shop version 1.0, I mean, I think some of the first projects that got a little notoriety were the things like we did for PS1 in the courtyard, our Dunescape project, where we had this kind of direct relationship between the performance of a beach, the way in which it would be assembled, and the kind of time and budget that it would be as a kind of piece of both art and sculpture and architecture. Richard Branson saw that piece and asked us to do the first-class lounge at Virgin Atlantic. Again, a very similar kind of system where we had to break, it was right after 9/11, we had to break the rules of how you actually built in an airport and use technology to kind of get around it to make this sort of thickness of surface, structure, and program and support services and lighting and aesthetics and delight into these kind of pre-made elements. Our park out on the eastern end of Long Island, the first sort of major competition we won to do this, to sort of reinvigorate a town about 100 miles outside of New York City with a series of different buildings, a carousel house. And then eventually the last building we did and a lot of this was all done with CNC technology, very early ideas in this, really early ideas about changing the kind of drawing types. But the last building we did at Mitchell Park was a Folly, which was a program requested by the mayor of the town to do a camera obscura. And we felt that, we were now in practice about 5 years, and we were sort of really kind of teaching a lot of this stuff, mostly at Columbia at the time. And we said, could we make a building? It was small enough, and we kind of just had enough skill, we thought, to try and pull it off. That was a pure performance envelope of a building that was completely derived from the scripts that we wrote, and that the entire building would be fabricated by the computer and assembled on site. And this was when the drawings really started to change. These are actually 4 drawings from the CD set itself. And when we finished this CD set and looked at the drawings, we didn't even realize we were doing it, but when we were done and we handed it into the building department, they said there are no dimensions on this set. And we realized that dimensions were no longer needed. And the building went together in 6.5 weeks with 2 men popping it together. Every single piece, 2,400 and something pieces, no 2 alike. Every single one arrived on site, pre-cut, pre-drilled, pre-numbered, pre-lettered, basically popped together like the most kick-ass piece of IKEA furniture you've ever seen. And then sort of ending it out, so this was a competition that we won to do a new academic building at the Fashion Institute of Technology. We were starting to get a chance to build at a bigger and bigger scale. This is a building that sort of takes a mostly brutalist campus in Midtown that's really one of the great fashion and design schools of the world, and sort of give what we said to the president, we're going to give you open heart surgery. We're going to crack your rib cage, open it up, and show what the students are doing, where the entire facade becomes almost like an ant farm of design and exhibition spaces. And this is a building that has been on again and off again for many, many years. We won the competition in 2002. But we've just heard it might be coming back to life, so hopefully we'll get to build it. The CDs are actually done and have been done for 5 years. And then even some of the things we've done for clients that we can't talk about, concert halls and secret labs and things that really bad black ops kind of stuff, but they wanted really beautiful stuff and we're willing to pay for it. So that was kind of all version, I can't really talk about it. I'm sure someone's in here watching me. So this was all kind of version 1.0, where it was, how do we take that diagram and begin to manipulate it? And we're not saying that you can do that on every project, but it was integrating with the subcontractors. It was integrating with other designers. It was integrating with our clients in different ways, with cities in different ways, with the manufacturers in different ways. And different kinds of projects had different opportunities to do that in different ways. We got to the point where we started thinking about becoming our own client. What if we just got rid of the client? What happens when you do that? How do you go about doing it, and what emerges? So, Shop version 1.0, as most of you know, like if you can win like 1 out of 10 competitions you enter, like you're doing okay, pretty good. If you win like 20%, 2 out of 10, like you're doing amazingly well. And we were incredibly lucky in that first phase. In that first phase, we entered 8 competitions and we won 6 of them, leading to those projects that you saw. And we were very proud of it. But what it did was getting those first things built gave us an opportunity to be invited to sort of bigger competitions and chase sort of larger work. And we kind of went from, let's say, 8 or 9 or 10 people to sort of 20 or 30, and went into what we call Shop version 2.0. So with Shop version 2.0, we started thinking about what is that next step? And the next step for us at first was how do we become the client? How do we begin to understand the relationship of the architect, the builder, and the owner from that side? And are there things that would happen to our design and to us as architects that would change the way we would think moving forward? So the first time we were able to successfully do it was at a building called the Porter House in the meatpacking district of Manhattan. And what happened at this building was there was a 6-story turn of the century, 100-year-old warehouse building. There was a 6 FAR in the district, so it was completely built out. And there were 2 smaller historic buildings to the south. And there were a bunch of, hungry developers in New York chasing after the property. And so then, basically, the whole idea was in order to bid a little bit more money to try and gain control of the property, you had to think of ways to expand the project to generate a little bit more revenue in order for you to bid a little bit more and outbid your competitors to get control of it. So, several of the people thought about this idea of buying the air rights from the next door neighbor and putting them on top. Now, the problem was there was a 120-foot height limit in the district, and there were setback requirements from the side streets, so there was kind of only so much you could go, unless you started to push it out and cantilever over the buildings to our south. And so a few less people thought of that idea. And of course, the more you could cantilever, the more revenue you would get, until the cantilever got so big that it started costing more, that you had a rate of diminishing return. And so working with Bureau Happold, one of the engineers we work with very often, we came up with a really kind of clever way of extending the cantilever very inexpensively, sort of taking an unreinforced masonry building, putting this kind of couple in and making a 3-story truss, if you will, that grabbed the forces as it came down, and that these foundations were in tension, these were in compression because the building wants to flip over this way, and we could just get it out a couple more feet. That gave us just a little bit more projected revenue that let us outbid our competitors by just a little bit, and we got control of the project. Now, we did all that by ourselves, and then we were like, how are we going to pay for this now that we've won the bid? So because we really didn't have any money, but that was sort of, an aside. And so we talked to some of our clients, and we asked if they would joint venture and put money in, and we asked friends and family, and we built a fund, and we went after it. And so we ended up forming a joint venture with Jeffrey Brown Associates from Philadelphia and New York. And we knew that we would have these sort of 2 volumes, this kind of historic volume on the bottom and a new volume on the top, that we just felt our idea of contextuality is that the building should not necessarily look exactly like the building next door. And let's just do a super contemporary box on top. We wanted to try a metal building. We hadn't done any metal yet. And so the idea of the building was, Well, we didn't want any kind of painted material. We wanted a raw, natural material. And we had settled on the idea of a zinc building. And so we went to zinc facade manufacturers, and the costs were through the roof. And we didn't understand, why would it be so much more? I mean, zinc only costs maybe like 10% more than stainless, and which is 10% more than painted metal. Why would it be 50% more for the whole facade? And they said, well, we don't really care, that's what it costs. And so we said, well, where does zinc come from? And they said, it mostly comes from France. So we got on a plane and we went to France, and we found a zinc manufacturer, and we bought 1,000 sheets of zinc that was 1 meter by 3 meters in length, and brought it back to New York, and we designed the entire building. Here's a 1 meter by 3 meter sheet, so that 1 unfolded panel, 2 unfolded panels, or 3 unfolded panels, plus the bottom slab cover would fit. We had a 97% use of our raw material. We wrote a script that then began to blur. We had 4 window sizes here, all the same height but different widths. And then we had 2 lighting element sizes, sort of a small and a large. It made about 21 kind of proto shapes, but then to absorb the differences in the heights of the existing building, the new building, the parapets, it ended up being about 480 unique shapes for 4,000 plus total shapes of zinc. So if you had to draw all those shop drawings and hope that they were all right, this would be an almost impossible thing. But it was the first time we used SolidWorks. This is, again, more than a decade ago. And instead of having to draw shop drawings, it was just a series of Excel spreadsheets. And it went directly from the digital model to the fabricators. The pieces were cut. They all had a code system, laser cut into the front, which became the instruction set for how to put the building together. So the architectural detailing of the building, it still remains there, are the instructions. And we actually used carpenters to install it. We started at that corner, went all the way around the building, got to the other side, and we were 1/32 of an inch off. And we were like, okay, that's probably good, and we should do this again. And it was amazing, and we did it with 0 shop drawings whatsoever. And so the building went together. It's 22 condominium units plus a retail space. We did the design, we did the financing, we actually helped manage the construction, we did the model units, we did the marketing materials, and we brought it to market. But you can see the typical units. There's a central core, and the typical units have 3 exposures, big, large open spaces. The core becomes the kind of lateral stability of the building, so no columns and no trusses holding up that cantilever. And then one of the things we felt was really important was playing with that idea of the depth on the facade itself to get this notion of texture. Sometimes I find metal buildings can be a little bit taut. I mean, sometimes that's very beautiful, but we really wanted to play with that. So we set all the windows 14 inches back, and then we were like, wow, that's going to make a lot of ledges, and we have a pigeon issue in New York. So what are we going to do? So we called the Museum of Natural History on the Upper West Side, and we asked, is there an angle of repose that a pigeon will not fly onto? And they said, in fact, there is. It's 34 degrees. So if you look right here, these are actually parts of the drawings from our set. And you saw that everything was coded like F and P, and there were all like different codes for it. These elements were labeled PS for pigeon slide. And it's amazing because if you're in the building, you actually see a bird come and land, and it goes like right off the edge. And you know, it's now, it finished in 2003, so it's 8 years later. I'm really proud to say not one turd on the entire black facade. So you could see the building, the collateral materials we developed, the lobby spaces, and then this whole kind of idea of the building that lights up at night and has sort of become an anchor for the district, the district, and you know, something that we're incredibly proud of. You know, we brought it to market, sold it, and the interesting thing was that, well, here's the biggest issue that I have to talk about, and the most important thing I can share with students especially, which was that, as a young practitioner and a teacher, I talked to my friends and my colleagues, people who I have tremendous respect for, and I was like, we're thinking about doing this, and I mean, I have to say, like, at least half the people were, you better watch out, you're getting in bed with the devil, this is a slippery slope to hell, like, your designs are gonna go down the crapper because you're, this. And I have to say, I mean, we were really kind of scared, to be honest with you. And I went to my dean, and I said, my former dean, and I said to Bernard, what do you think? And he's like, oh, don't listen to them. He's like, you have no idea. Corb did development, Los did development. He's like, they all did this stuff on the side to help fund their other work. And I didn't really know that. And he went through a litany of different architects, and we took a shot. Now, with that said, what we did learn, though, was, as the developers and the bankers say so crudely, once you have some skin in the game, it was not that you lost control of the architecture and the design, but what we found, in fact, was the exact opposite. Once they saw that you were invested with them and that you would suffer if they would suffer, we got total design freedom. It was a complete 180-degree difference from what we expected. And suddenly, we were spending more time saying, like, you probably don't want to spend money in this place, or if we want to spend money, here's where we should do it, or we want to try this because we think it's smart, we'll take on the risk. They said, we'll take on the risk with you. And it was an amazing thing that we really saw this huge turnaround with the sort of joint venture partners and the bankers once we were invested. They didn't think that it was the architects just trying to spend as much money as they could to get on the cover of a magazine, or for whatever reason that they didn't understand, art, theory, history, those things that bankers don't pay attention to, but that it was something. There was something very, very different, and suddenly we could bring art, history, and theory to a building. And so we don't want to be a design, build, develop firm. That's not the idea. This isn't about making more money, but what it was about was architecture gaining back territory. Because if you do look in history, the master builder, there is a long history of being involved in this way. And so for us, it was kind of the first time we made a breakthrough to where architects could practice in a different way, could grab that territory, can engage in all those different aspects of making buildings, and start to have more control. So, and what the building looks like today. So, these ideas started to play with the way we were building buildings. So that's a building that we sort of were in control of every single part of. But then we did some other smaller buildings. This is a sort of book house, cafe, exhibition hall, art as part of the Harry Valley Arts Complex. And here was a building that this is outside of Seoul in South Korea. And here was a building where we could only bring it through design development and hand it off to contractors. So what were the kinds of drawings that we would have to make to ensure a certain level of quality? The interesting idea of the house was that you actually entered off the roof, and then the bookstore, Hangil-sa is a book publisher, and you go around a sort of three-story high wall of books, which is the bookstore, and you sort of come out at the bottom. It's kind of the original sketches of it. And we got this building built very quickly without us being on top of every single element of it. And a lot of it was sort of taking those ideas of the kind of full-scale template drawings about making it simple enough that it could be executed easily. And here's the kind of entry as you come in at the top, and the sort of screen wall. It was just a series of poured-in-place concrete walls, and then a big a ramp, and then this big sort of scrim that rolls across the front of the building. So you can see the plan was exceptionally simple and straightforward. Here's the wall of books, and there were a couple double height spaces here and here. And that was the entry as you walked in, and you begin to sort of see as you came off the hillside. You come off the hillside right up here, around the back, and then you sort of go down and around. But it was really terrifying for us to kind of let the design go, where we were so used to kind of being on top of every single aspect of it. And it turned out well. There were definitely some substitutions that were made, but for some reason, I guess the way that we had drawn a few things, the key things that really mattered to us stayed. And the key, I think, was to make this wave very simple, where we just developed this kind of joint that could rotate and was easy for them to sort of put together off the full templates. But that was kind of our first public building of any scale that got built, and we're just proud of the way it kind of sits in the hillside. Sort of enter off here. That's actually the front door here, down, around, and out, and the way it kind of glows at night. With some of these successes, we entered a competition to do the East River waterfront in Lower Manhattan. And we actually entered this one. It was just to do the master plan. We put a team together of Richard Rogers, Shop, Bureau Happold, and Ken Smith Landscape Architects. We won the competition to do the master plan. And the way that we thought, so here we were now advising a government, and it was a very different role. And so at the time, this is 8 years ago, the city was thinking about Brooklyn Bridge Park, Governor's Island, and the East River waterfront, which is basically an esplanade. And we said to them, you've got to really think of it as sort of one park surrounding a harbor in a way, because this is the scale of Central Park in New York, just to give you a sense. And that even though 3 different designers could be there, the city has to think about sort of, now you have so many people living in Lower Manhattan and Brownstone, Brooklyn, this is as important as Central Park in a certain way. And so there was a kind of 45-year history of failed projects on this site from some of the greatest architects in the world. And we kind of were saying, like, well, if these guys couldn't do it, like, what was the problem? What should we do? So we analyzed every one, and the thing that we got was that every one of those was a kind of big object clipped onto the side of Manhattan. And what we felt the big problem was that you had sort of 7 different neighborhoods, and all you really needed to do was just sort of get these cross-grain connections going so that people could just get out to the water. Because if you lived on this block on the Lower East Side, 10 years ago, you would typically think, oh, if I'm going to go to the river, I'll go over to the Hudson. And very few people would go over to the East River. And this is a place that's desperate for open space, but there just was, they just didn't go to it. And well, why? Well, these are the before pictures. So if you think about it, this is some of the only truly south-facing waterfront property on Manhattan. And here's the financial center of the world, and like 5 minutes away, and this is what it looked like, right? They were using it to store garbage, truck parking. These beautiful 18th century squares were parking lots. Infrastructure was cutting through. There were places where the sidewalk and the bike lane would shrink down to 18 inches wide. And people were getting hit by cars every single year there. We had some places on the Lower East Side where we counted up to 14 layers of chain link fence between where people lived and the waterfront. And so we just said to the city, look, we also did a sort of in-depth mapping of different kind of existing infrastructures and how to take advantage of them. And then we leased a helicopter one day, a photographer's helicopter, and got in harnesses, and we hung out, and we asked them to fly over the shoreline of all 5 boroughs of New York City and made a taxonomy of shoreline types and looked at them and tried to say what works and what doesn't work and what could we adapt and lessons are learned for Lower Manhattan. And the 2 that were the most interesting to us were sort of parts of Midtown, and it was really where the buildings got close enough where there were these ideas of kind of views and a sort of relationship between a highway and views and the waterfront. So we said to the city, look, here's your current condition. You've got, it's not Water Street. Water Street here, Front Street, South Street. And basically this is the last street that kind of works. This one's sort of a service street. And then you have the parking, the highway above, the chain link fences, the sheds on the piers. But at the end of the day, the thing that we realized was the most damaging to making this work was the distance between this curve and this curve. And because it was a non-signalized street that varied anywhere from like 110 to 160 feet wide underneath an overpass, it was dangerous. People were afraid to just cross it. So we just said, look, get rid of the parking, add trees wherever you can, We looked at taking, get the bike lane going to finish the circumference of the Manhattan bike lane. And then we tried to get the FDR taken down, and we spent a year studying it. But for many, many reasons, they didn't want to take it down. So we said, okay, we could either complain or we could think of it as a free roof. And let's start to build a series of boxes that could hold programs so that you could bring the activity and what's great about the city out to this waterfront park, or esplanade, if you will. So again, the idea, plant trees where you can, shrink South Street to a 60-foot standard New York City side street, build boxes so that it mitigates the presence of the highway above. And then you cannot expand the size of the piers for shading issues, environmental issues. So we said, any chance you can, start building double-decker piers so we get a 2-for-1 of open space for the public wherever possible. So they said, well, who the hell would ever want to rent space underneath the FDR Drive? And we said, well, we think lots of people could use it. It could be community, cultural, recreational. It could even be this. And that the idea would be that these could open up and these sort of activities could spill out onto the esplanade and give it life in the cold months as well. So they then had a second competition. So everyone liked the plan. It was a big success. They then had a second competition as to who would actually design it and lead the team through the process of building it. Richard Rogers was busy working on the Trade Center and the Javits Convention Center, and we had a long conversation, and he said, I've got so much work, and he's like, you guys can handle it. And I said, are you cool? We're good? We can go after it on our own? He said yes. And so we teamed. It was with Arup, Ken Smith, and Shop. Teamed and competed again, and we were fortunate enough to win the competition a second time. So the eventual design ends up looking something like this. There's a series of kind of precast black concrete walls that allow us to build up the soil, because these are platforms, so there's actually no soil underneath there. The pavilions get built underneath, and then we actually there's a series of railings, chairs, which I'll go through, and then we eventually do get to design a 5-year battle, but we design and get built a double-decker recreation pier. There were other piers. There's a giant sanitation shed hidden behind this sort of big screen wall with swings. The rail sort of moves in and out, and it's this kind of kit of parts that responds to the neighborhood behind it. One of our great triumphs, another 3-year battle for me personally, was I'm always frustrated when I'm on an esplanade, because when you sit on a standard chair and look out at the water, the 42-inch rail is exactly where your eyes are blocking the water. So I spent 3 years convincing the city of New York that we should only install bar seating along the entire front, and that the rail should sort of vary from 6 inches wide up to 18 inches. You could sit there, you could have your lunch, you could flip open your laptop. We convinced the city to paint the girder of the FDR through the whole park lavender. I'll explain that in a second. Here's some of and then the pavilions are these weathered steel perforated sort of boxes that sit under the FDR and open themselves up onto these front porches, and they flank, excuse me. Excuse me. So this was a key part of the design. For me, I always feel like when you go to the water's edge, especially at night, whether it's like a bonfire on the beach or down to the riverfront or whatever, there's this kind of darkness, and the city recedes behind, or the beach dunes recede behind you, and it's about like the stars or the moon or the boats out there, and it had to have this darkness. So it was critical for us that there would be no observable lighting anywhere, and that all lights would be buried and all lighting would be reflected off a surface. And so actually the whole idea of the lavender beam is that the lights are actually hidden up in the edge of the FDR. This is a collage when we were still doing it. These are all gone. And the light hits the beam and then reflects this beautiful lavender light out onto the facade. Oh, these were the first testing of it. This is last March when we were putting it in. If you're like sort of on a second or third date, like this is the best place to go, because everyone looks good in lavender light, I have to say. So here's the park as of about a month ago, the first 4 blocks, after 8 years, the first 4 blocks open, and it will continue in a series of sections over the coming 3 or 4 years until we finish the entire 1.8-mile esplanade. But wherever there were historic slips, we cut into the seawall and got these large steps all the way down so you could touch the water. In fact, in the Hurricane Irene a few weeks ago, New York One, which is our own local sort of 24-hour news network, was only filming in a sort of tight shot the waves coming over this rail and saying how bad the storm was. And we were just hysterically laughing because we're like, it's designed for the waves to come over the top. It's way down below. Actually, it was really funny because I think the anchor eventually sort of saw that, and he's like, "Are those steps designed to go down to the water?" Yes, but it's a really bad storm anyway. But then there are these LED lights in the vertical rails so that it makes this kind of mark. Looking from the Brooklyn Heights Promenade, you sort of see this link between the strip of steel. And we didn't want to hide the kind of industrial tectonic. We sort of wanted to celebrate it. The plantings that Ken Smith worked on. Here you can see our bar seats. There's a kind of super hex paver. Ken had this great idea of pixelizing the wave patterns of the East River and doing these different shades of gray. And then looking up towards the north at night, lots of different seating types, a giant dog run that has a huge concrete squirrel to scare the dogs. You can see the bar seats with all made from a ductile concrete. They wrap around, doesn't touch right there, and it's for your footrest. They're super comfortable. They're really the most popular part of the park. In subsequent phases, we're going to really amp the number of bar seats in there. Some more of the plantings, and then looking at the pier under construction over here. So this is the rendering of the pier. It's this kind of idea that the esplanade continues out. It has maritime activities. This would be a maritime education center for local school children, sort of ticketing and a cafe and an ice cream parlor in this one. And these 2 glass boxes suspend what we call the giant tuna belly, which is this great undulating sort of red and pink scrim. All the lights, again, indirectly up in the scrim, and then above, it's a complete wooden deck. So the materiality changes when you get above, and the glass boxes have lawns, green roofs that are lawns that you can picnic on. So again, here you could see where the wood sort of drops down to the middle part. The ADA ramp continues right up, and it creates an amphitheater so that you can look to the north and look on the decks of the historic ships in the South Street Seaport Museum. Because I don't know, as a kid growing up there, I always looked at the ships, but you can never see what's on the deck. So I thought that would be kind of good. So they put all the piles in. Steel went up, all galvanized, hot dip galvanized. And I tried to get photos because it's opening in 2 weeks, but I just didn't get them in the presentation this morning. But they'll be in the paper next month, and we can send some up to you guys. So here we are doing public work, and then there's this kind of idea that in the middle of this whole project was a Rouse development. So it's like, like a Faneuil Hall kind of thing called the South Street Seaport and Pier 17 Shopping Mall, which is this awful place that I hope I don't offend anyone from Boston, but the joke in New York is no New Yorkers go there because it's the place that most reminds them of Boston. And and it was designed by Ben Thompson, of course. So so they came to us and they said, well, what would you do if we could just knock this thing down? Now, this mall has lost $100 million since it opened in 1983. And we said, well, first of all, it's a mall, and malls don't really work in New York, but it's at such an incredible site. And we understand why they made the decisions they did. It was a very different city at that time, but the historic district is here. These were the old fish market buildings, which weren't particularly pleasant. And, but still, why you would make your way all the way down here, go inside a 3-story enclosed shopping mall on the water in front of the Brooklyn Bridge, I think we might rethink that differently. So here we go. So we said, what do we have to do? So we said, look, take the historic building, move it and reestablish it. I know this is like a total no-no in the preservation world, but we just figured we had to take a shot. So we were like, make it a food market building, restore this building, make it something great, put it out on the end, and let's get a real street pattern going underneath the FDR Drive. Let's get the Esplanade going through. Let's open up the views to the pier of the Brooklyn Bridge. And let's build this and even break it down more so that there's actually a kind of neighborhood. These are a series of pavilions under the FDR Drive. This is a kind of 18th century alley. Actually, we were planning on continuing it through this building and make this kind of street grid that you could walk through. And again, some of the same ideas, reducing the size of the streets. And this would be the view of here are the pavilions, and you're sort of looking through into this neighborhood. Then they wanted a small boutique hotel that they wanted above a kind of retail base. So we said, float these two kind of piers off of large gantries and float them above this kind of 2-story high retail zone. And here you could see the Esplanade going through, the retail and the boutique hotels above. And then the hotels, we just said, make them out of, use airplane hangar doors, bifold doors, and just give everyone a remote control from their bed so that you could sit in the hotel room and open and close your, your shutters. Sort of these would be the views walking through and looking at the Brooklyn Bridge. And then to shift as much of the volume in the FAR, we said give a 4-acre open space out on the pier in front of the big market building with this incredible view of the bridge and shift the FAR into one slender tower. The height limit in the area was 120 feet, so we proposed 495. And we said we've got to break it apart into these 3 programmatic elements. And to build this building with an exoskeleton that changes from top to bottom based on the kind of program that you have. And it holds these 3 sort of shifting glass boxes in the middle of this terracotta-clad steel exoskeleton. So again, the sort of shifting of the pattern and the kind of view where you could see it from the bridge. So the restored market building, the 4-acre open park, which was designed by James Corner. He worked very closely with us on the whole project. The kind of mixed-use building with all the retail at the bottom, the boutique hotel, the 5-star hotel, and the residential on top. All for a bargain price of $1 billion. This was a project that was led by General Growth Properties, who had bought the Rouse Company in early 2003. And some of you may or may not know, but in 2009, $66 billion market cap General Growth Properties became the largest real estate bankruptcy in the history of the United States. And it wasn't because the company wasn't doing well. The company was actually making money all through the crash and the recession. It was just that their senior management had decided to buy everything and finance it with 5-year debt. And so it all came 2003, when they went on their big shopping spree, all came due in 2008, and there were no loans to have. The whole thing collapsed. So the company has emerged from bankruptcy. General Growth Properties is running the shopping malls, which are successful, and you know many of them all over the country, all over North America. And they split off into a new company called all the development deals. The properties went into a company called the Howard Hughes Corporation because they owned Howard Hughes's old ranches in outside of Las Vegas, the Summerlin properties. And this project, believe it or not, is back, and we are working on it. Now, will it look like this? Will it be this? We don't know. There's probably things that we're going to do a little bit differently, but we started about 3 months ago, and it's full steam ahead. So, for me, I just feel that view being 500 feet out in the river and looking at the Brooklyn Bridge and making a kind of real neighborhood and trying to get the right kind of mixture of stores and everything and retail and other kinds of experiences and putting serious architecture out there. This should be one of the iconic places of the city. So we're hoping to get the tower. They're behind the tower. And we'll see what happens over the next years. I'm sure you'll be reading it. I'm sure I'll be vilified in certain places many, many times over, but it'll be a fun challenge. So that's shop version 2.0, and then to just show you kind of 3.0. So in shop 2.0, we were kind of, I think we did 9 invited paid competitions, and we won 6 of them. So our batting average was still incredibly high, and we were very, very proud. And then we sort of started moving. Well, then the crash happened. We lost at least half of our work. A lot of our development deals went south. We took a beating on a lot of stuff, but we kept the firm together. We were up to 80 at the height. We reduced down to 60, but we kept 60 people working all through the recession. And you know, it didn't really matter that we lost money, because I just felt like we got. I mean, there's dozens of projects I'm not showing, but we got to try so many different things and try so many different materials, and understand how to build in all those different realms. And to us, that was what was really important. So the good news is, in shop version 3.0, we've gotten these things out there. They've gotten good responses. Suddenly, the last 2 competitions we did, it was Richard Rogers, again, invited paid competition. So it was Richard Rogers, Herzog and de Meuron, Norman Foster, and Shop. And the other one was Tom Main, Diller Scofidio, KPF, Norman Foster, and Shop. And we were like, and this is how it's happening. And we're like, wow, oh my God, we better not screw up. Like, we're just, we still feel like kids trying this stuff. And so this was really amazing. So the bad news is our winning percentage has gone way down, like way down. But we're still there. So we've won 1 out of the 3, but we're still battling through it right now. And actually, the 4th one we're waiting to hear any minute on. So I'll just show you quickly a couple of the fast ones that we did. So one was to do a 1/4-mile high tower. I cannot say what city it's in as part of the non-disclosure agreements we signed. So you might recognize different cities or make-believe cities in the background. But it was a very simple mixed-use kind of building, and we basically took the ideas from the South Street Seaport Tower and tried to apply them to this competition. So we just said, optimize floor plates for each program, stack the amounts of programs in the brief, pull them apart and float them, and connect them with an exoskeleton. And then there were different kinds of views. And so the brief called for the building to be in one particular position, which meant orienting it towards the north. And we made an argument that if you thought about the oblique views and the other views you got, that we tried lots of different ways, and that we felt that if you turned the building and made it into this shape, in fact, you maximize the views, and you started to think of it in a different way, because you sort of eliminate all the bad obliques and you get as much good as possible. So we started thinking about performatively how much we could push and pull the folds on the exoskeleton and still make it hold the building and conform to the zoning issues. We took a similar idea to the Seaport building tower and did this kind of exoskeleton. The sort of hotel in the middle has a smaller floor plate, so it actually floats in from the exoskeleton, and it's kind of connected by balconies. And this was the sort of design of the building. And so you had offices and a hotel, so this becomes kind of like the restaurant, the shared programs of the restaurants and lobbies and bars here, and then the sort of spas and pools and workout rooms shared between the residential and the hotel. And of course, in these buildings, it's all about the core and making it work. And so from the park, what the building might look like with this kind of bronze inset and this kind of white terracotta top, the office plates, the view out from the lobby. If anyone can tell me what city that is, there's a bonus. It's Tehran, which is not one that we all know off the top of our heads. Anyway, the kind of idea of the pools. We actually, the first time we presented this, someone was diving off the diving board, and it looked like they had just jumped off the building. Client wasn't happy. And the kind of housing and how it worked, and sort of the building as it turned around. But the building is amazing because all four sides are completely different, and so no matter how you look at it, it really changes. And there's something there. I mean, that's 3 weeks of work, and to figure it out that much. And we built this really amazing model. So it came down to Herzog and Shop were the final two, and Herzog got the project. But I'm banking that they'll bust the budget and they might come back to us. So that's why I'm not showing the city and getting in trouble with the client. This was a project, again, for a London headquarters. I cannot say who it is. But it's a company that's in New York and wanted to build a headquarters in London. So the way we just thought about it quickly, again, this is a 3-week competition, was the idea of the kind of grid versus the medieval plan, the sort of vertical city versus the horizontal city. This is to scale, by the way, which I never knew how small the Gherkin really was until I looked at it over there. But then we just said, how do you make the client wanted an iconic building. So they said, we said, well, how do you make in the horizontal city, how do you do it? Well, you do have the tower. You get a square in front of it, or you put the courtyard inside. That becomes your sort of iconic element. And so we just said simply, like, what if the thing that we love about London, and we spend a lot of time there because we work mostly with Bureau Happold and Arup, are mostly our engineers, Thornton Tomasetti in New York, but mostly BH and Arup. And so, it's this notion of being in the kind of compressed space, and then you kind of pop into the square, or you're on the oblique as it turns, and then it opens. So this kind of tightness and opening. And so we said, well, what if you turned that idea vertically, thought about parks through the building, made these kind of connections between them? And the site was very close to St. Paul's, so we had real difficulties with view corridor and restraints about height, and so it was really tricky because how do you make an icon where it had to be squashed down like a pancake? So we were very closely connected to 3 tube stops, and this is a great little Wren church. So we said, continue and this was a Roman ruin, actually, on Walbrook, a temple. So we said sort of open up the site so that when you're moving, you can see all these elements, continue the old medieval streets. It was 2 buildings. One was the headquarters, one was an ancillary building. And we said, what's the relationship between those 2 buildings? I think we ended up at cousins or sisters. And we said, so you take the park, you put it up in the air, it's the commons. This is the way this company works. Everyone arrives at one place, and then they sort of move through the building through the day. And that the commons sort of reaches out to the icons that it sees in the sky, so that constantly, wherever you are, because this is a global business, you immediately know you're in London because a lot of the employees travel around the world constantly. And then from each of the icons, it sort of informs the shape as it goes back on the icon, if you will. And this is the view of the building from the Tate Modern. So again, it's this kind of glass box with these connecting elements and this sort of large sculptural element that becomes this sort of performance wing for the way that the company works and its location in London. Those are the kind of connecting stairs. So you get this sort of double moment where you're looking at St. Paul's and you're looking at the street, and then all the conference rooms sort of cantilever into these zones as you move down through the building. So it makes these kind of elements. This is sort of looking down the zone. So this is sort of each floor as you move down the building. The kind of office plates. And then the view of the building as you come at it from St. Paul's with the element. This is the sort of spec building, if you will, all street retail, except for not here. This is the headquarters, so it doesn't have it. And actually, we dropped all their training facilities into the basement so you can look at them from the street, watching everyone sort of learn to move up the tubes into the monster on top. We also planted a sheep farm it was pastures with sheep grazing on the roof of the building next to it. They told us they hated that idea in the competition, but we were fighting for it anyway. And then there's this sort of big open covered garden so that from when you're eating, you can eat outside, but in the London rain, you're still protected. So again, the sort of commons plan, these are the sheep pastures, and then looking at it. So this one came down to Norman Foster and Shop, and Lord Foster got us in London, so it happens. But we were close. We were close, and I'm sure you'll see ideas of this kind of emerge in some of the other work. So many of you don't know, another company that we worked with for a long time is Google. We were commissioned in 2006 to do their first ground-up building. The founders asked us to build a building that would be, they said, if you build the LEED Platinum building, we will have considered that you failed. We want 2 or 3 generations past LEED. We said that's going to be a tremendous amount of research. They said, go for it. And we did research for about 2 years. And again, with the 2008 crash, the building went on hold. We've just finished a couple other buildings for them. I can't talk about more like interior fit outs, but hopefully the main building will come back. But the main idea for the building was this sort of large energy blanket and this kind of series of bringing in different volumes, sort of carving in deep into the building for the right kind of office space and connectivity and ramping and a lot of things that they were very interested in, plus the way of dealing with the cars on grade but berming up the land on each side to sort of cover the cars. There's a lot of performative reasons why they had to do that. It was a full base isolation building, other things. But withstanding, these are the concepts from the Google building that we did, and what the building looked like when we had schematic done in 2008. The building went on hold, and so we entered a different competition in 2009 for a innovation hub in Botswana, Africa. So it was a government complex in Gaborone, outside of the capital. And so we basically said, let's just take all the stuff that we had learned from all this research and try to apply it to the climate in Botswana, Africa. So their 2 most prominent landscape features are sort of the dune and the delta, and it was this idea of striating those 2 and making a series of buildings that had the same. They wanted a high performance sort of green building, if you will. So again, this idea of an energy blanket in South Africa, the kinds of pods, water collection system, the berming for the parking, and these buildings that got connected. And so that was the competition-winning design, the image. So again, all these ways of catching prevailing winds. This would be the largest green/brown roof in South Africa. The coolest thing is that there were these amazing 200-year-old trees all over the site. And so we proposed leaving the trees in place and building the parking below, and then leaving these holes so that they come up through the middle of the courtyard spaces and give the shading. Because in the shade, the climate's actually much nicer than it is in here. And the idea is that you could sort of walk through these glass tubes, be in the treetops, and then the sort of parking happens below, and these are all these sort of seating areas and are all part of the performance of the building itself. I mean, a lot of the shapes and forms are, again, come purely out of the CFD analysis. The hundreds of different basket weaving and layered types and pieces really are how the building is being articulated. And so we won this competition. This is sort of the current, this is probably the DD, the end of DD. So it's a 350,000 foot, what they call the icon building, in a master plan of 3 million square feet. And basically the government of Botswana is incredibly progressive, stable democracy for over 45 years, amazing education. They know the diamonds are running out, so they're investing all their money into seeding these industries. So high-tech companies are invited from all over the world. Harvard's going to put the largest HIV labs here. Ericsson's coming. A lot of other people are coming to work there. They sort of see themselves as a benevolent Switzerland of the southern half of Africa. And I think they're going to do it. And this, when you come out of the airport road, on the right is the Diamond Exchange, and this building will be on the left. And so they really see it as a kind of icon for the future of their tech industries. That's what you'll see as you drive down the road of the tech industry and of the changing economy of Botswana, and sort of the view from the typical labs and office spaces. So this is under construction, which we're really proud of, and should be done in about 18 more months. So the last project I'll show you is the Barclays Center at Atlantic Yards. Some of you may have heard of this project. I happen to be a sports fan as well as an architect, and I'm a born and raised New Yorker. And so the chance to sort of build, I missed out on Yankee Stadium. I was too young, so the chance, all the stadiums have been pretty much rebuilt. So the chance to build an arena or stadium in my home city was something I was always interested in. I don't know how many of you know the sort of story behind this project, but it's a highly controversial project. Frank Gehry was the architect, did a master plan for 6 million square feet of housing with an arena in the middle of it for a series of various reasons, most notably being the crash of 2008/9. They couldn't proceed with that design. They went to a design build firm named Hunt, and Hunt said if you want to get it in the ground by a certain date, which they had to for tax law reasons, we've got to do a design build, we've got to pick an arena that exists out there, and we've got to take the drawings and put them on the site, because they had 7 months to redesign an arena and order the steel and get it in the ground. So they did that. There was not a terrific reception for their design, and they asked us to come in and see if we could rethink it. So we were very wary of sort of doing a skin job, if you will. So we just said if we could successfully change the outside, would we have an opportunity to do the inside? We'd like to do the interiors, the concourses, the bowl. We'd like to do the public space, the subway station connecting it, and we would want a chance at the 6 million square feet of housing if we can pull it off. And they said, okay. So we had to redesign the whole arena, detail it, and cost it in 7 weeks. And I'll show you. So this is what we did. So let's just say there was a box, and the box was very vertical in its orientation, and we felt that that was exactly the wrong thing to do for Brooklyn. So it's surrounded mostly by 5-story fabric, if you will. And we said, why don't we divide the building horizontally so that you have a kind of 5-story element, a setback, and we make it mostly glass around the middle, and then the kind of halo, if you will, that sort of tops the top part of the arena roof. Let's make sure that we lift these elements as much as possible to open them up, because I think one of the problems in stadium design is that it's dead when it's not a game, right? That there's this blank wall, the kind of, the nuclear reactor in the middle of the parking lot kind of model. And so let's make sure that the views are constant. Let's make sure that the concourses are aligned with the sidewalks or aligned with the rooftops so that people are walking, retail could be programmed in, and you get something that's more alive every day. And then there was a large open plaza at the front, almost a full acre, with a subway station, 9 subway lines plus the Long Island Railroad stop here. It's the 3rd largest transportation hub in the city of New York. So let's make a large cantilevered sort of civic gesture. So we proposed the cantilever, and then we said, why don't we make a big oculus so that when it's not dark under there, when you come out of the subway, you look through it and up to the sky. And so those were the principles we designed, and this was the kind of idea of making a sort of series of panels of folded plate steel that actually we redid a sort of taut skin in mostly glass or kind of a dark gray metal panel, and that's the weather sealing. And then anywhere from like 5 to 15 feet off the facade, this sort of element wraps around the entire building, made of 12,000 uniquely shaped pieces of plate steel that are weathered, or you might know them as Corten, but they're not Corten. It's a new process that we've developed. So again, this idea of coming out of the subway, and you see the kind of elements as they wrap around, and the glass, both at the ground floor and the retail, and also at the upper concourse level. And one of the great design elements is that the lobby is this sort of large opening, and from the outside, you can actually see the scoreboard hanging and right into the bowl. The players are obviously down below, but you can see right in. And here's this idea of this is an 80-foot cantilever by 120 feet. The oculus is bigger than a basketball court, just to give you some sense of scale, this is 35 feet in the air, and that's 10 feet deep. So it's this, I mean, really sort of civic scaled element. You can see the upper halo, the glass, the retail along Atlantic Avenue, and then this is the transportation hub where you exit and look through and up to the top. So one of the things, and then the whole thing, as we said, is folded so that it's perforated and kind of lightens the feel of the arena itself. One of the things we wanted was we didn't want to hang all the signage, all the Daktronics and digital signs blaring out into the neighborhood. And so we convinced the client that this is really one of the great views, and could we put all the signage on the inner ring, the inner surface of the Oculus itself. And so we convinced them to do that. And so this would be the view as you come up. There's the scoreboard hanging, and you could project anything on there. We're proposing that when a game isn't on, they could do live feeds from Prospect Park, and you would have this sort of bucolic scene floating on the inside of this monster. Then the first 3 towers are going to be around the building itself. Here's the plaza and the Oculus. There's our bucolic scenes on non-game days. And then the idea, so we did that, we detailed it, we hit the budgets, we showed them how to build it. We were hired and then started to work on the interiors, the plaza, the transportation hub, the bowl, the public spaces, and have now been hired, it's now 2 years later. The building is under construction. We've been hired to design the first 1.7 million square feet of affordable housing. By the way, the first building is 100% affordable. The others are blends, and the towers around the arena itself, which we're working on now. But the steel, the idea is that the steel ribs wrap in, and this notion of like the kind of streets with the dark night sky, and then the ribs making the lighting fixtures, so that the surface just comes in and folds. These steel boxes for the concession stands and the vomitories, and then this kind of, well, that's what they're called. Got to teach your Roman architecture, classical architecture. Then the sort of concourses as they go around. It's a very sort of tight, steep. Ellerby Beckett did really great designs on the arena itself, and working with them has been terrific. But again, we want to do this super black, super dark, very dramatic kind of, black box theater feeling in the arena. I mean, even the bars are, again, this kind of minimalist element. This is one of the beers of Brooklyn bars or something like that. You can see the Corten weathered steel ribs coming through. Jay-Z is one of the owners of the Nets, so it's fantastic because we get to work with Jay-Z directly on the club design. He's an amazing man. Yeah. I'm not cool enough, but we try. I shouldn't say it. We're being filmed, right? Yeah, all right, can't say it. So anyway, these like kind of cool boxes where bars sort of pop into the arena itself in certain spots. And then the whole trick was, how do we build it? Because if we couldn't figure out how to build it, it was just a rendering. And so we showed them how you unfold it using a lot of the things we learned back on the camera obscura, on the Porterhouse, on all of those buildings. And we said, this is how you do it. We do all the things that we've learned over a decade has led to the launching of Shop Construction as well, which is a kind of advisory CM technology joint venture company. It's a separate company from Shop Architects, but they're now building things for many, many well-known architects. And we can take all the stuff that we've learned for Shop, and you can hire them, and they'll do it, and there's no secrets, and everyone's cool with it. So anyway, directly from the CATIA models, Shop Construction and ASI, fantastic facade manufacturer, are in a joint venture producing all of this. So it's really coming directly from our models to the production tickets. There's a 20,000-foot facility built out in Indianapolis, and the panels are cut with the plasma cutters, folded with computerized brakes, and they're hung on this kind of dry cleaning rack, if you will. And they go through 16 wet-dry cycles a day, and it takes the panels 4 months to go through the entire factory, and when they come out at the end, they have 10 years of patina on them. And they're all they're tagged with barcode systems, and we wrote our own iPhone app where you can go up with an iPhone at any one, you can scan it, it shows you how far it is along in the process and where it goes on the building, which mega panel it goes on, and where it is in the delivery process and how it goes on, so that anyone from Bruce Ratner, the owner of the stadium, to the guy screwing the bolts in, can at the same time go up and zap any piece and they know exactly where it goes. So this is a shop construction product. And so there are 12,000 panels that get assembled into 921 mega panels. The mega panels are designed to be exactly the size of a truck that's allowed into New York City. And they're driven, about 2 a day are now coming in from the Midwest. And these were the first mock-ups of the panels where we were testing them down in Florida for leaking and hurricane strength. And this is just the other day. These are some of the panels going up on the side. So we've got about 70. It's not a very good photo. We just sort of took it with the phone. But we got about 70 of the 900 mega panels are already up, and you could see it going together. And then every one of the folds, all of the perforation and the kind of glass was all set by the zoning code because there were requirements for how much glazing. So down to the square inch, we have it right. And then we did a highly reflective glass, sort of very 70s, if you will, because we wanted the sort of like the sunny day to sort of come through it, and then at night it's reverse anyway and you don't see it. And the other day we were there and there were sort of white puffy clouds on a blue sky, and I was like, this is like Magritte and Sarah's nightmare child that came together. So anyway, and then all the panels fold, as you could see, and then they're lit from inside. And so at night, this is what we expect the building to look like. So in conclusion, at the end of the day, architecture is the last great generalist profession. But what I'm afraid of is that the AIA and other institutions have tried to make us specialists, in the production of aesthetics and renderings and the image of buildings. But what we're great at is the thickness of buildings, all the stuff that goes into it. We are the people. Our skill set is that we know a lot. We know something about 1 million different things, and we synthesize them together. And when you're on the job site, you know more than the banker because you know all the other things. You know more than the owner because you know all this other stuff. You know more than the contractor. They know more about each one of their specialist things, but you know more in total about everything that's going on there. So don't give up that quality. That's a special thing that we have as architects, and it's something that we have to cherish, and we have to use, and we have to grab back the territories that we've systematically given away mostly to the legal profession and the construction industry over the 30 years. I think this is an amazing time to be a young architect. I think that the technology shifts that are going on right now are paradigm changes that allow young architects to invent new kinds of things and jump into the making of cities and scales, cities to work at scales and to make cities and to make culture in a very, very different way than we have in the past. Thank you very much.